EUC Podcast.
This is Dane Young, and you're listening to the End User Computing Podcast, episode number 5. Today I'm joined with a number of esteemed colleagues. Chris, why don't you start?
You always start with me. It's an alphabetical thing, isn't it? I guess it is.
Chris Rogers, everyone.
Yes, Chris Rogers, CTP, Federal Vertical IoT, and I seem to have adopted recently the term General Mayhem, so I'll answer to that too.
This is Dane Young, and you're listening to the End User Computing Podcast, episode number 5. Thanks, Thomas.
Yeah.
Joined with a number of esteemed colleagues. Chris?
I'm having deja vu.
You can turn off the video now, Thomas.
Hey, Chris, if I can add to your introduction, you also do a great Doc Brown and a great Klingon, by the way.
Federal
I was going to say, wait till you see next Synergy.
Oh, wow.
The costume is already in preparation, so.
Okay,
All
we're
right.
official.
It looks like Thomas got his audio issues worked out, so I think we're good.
Thanks, Thomas.
No comment, nothing? You're not even going to speak up at this point? I think he's embarrassed.
I think he's busy playing Star Wars Battlefront.
You see, you see my picture in. That's how red my head is right now.
Well, it wouldn't be a podcast without some technical challenges. Go ahead, Dwayne.
Hi there, technical marketing engineer for Nutanix, MPP, MSS, vExpert, all things VDI, I guess.
All things fun. And
Exactly.
Thomas, Mr. Redman.
Yes, Thomas POPPELGAARD, and I'm a Citrix technology professional and a Microsoft MVP and less ISVP.
Steve.
And Steve Greenberg from Scottsdale, Arizona, also Citrix CTP, longtime integrator, tech consultant, and ready to talk about some cool stuff.
Very cool. Well, I think it's safe to say that the live broadcast is working, so thank you for validating that, Thomas. Why don't we, it's been a little while since we've chatted, so let's, it's probably 3-4 months or so. I think Bryforum Denver was the last time that we talked, and a lot has happened in the industry since then. So I know I've been busy with projects, as I'm sure many of you guys have, whether directly for your companies or for customers. So why don't we go around the room and talk about anything that's super interesting projects, either internal or external, that you've been working on. Of course, only share details that you're allowed to share, but just looking to see what you guys have been up to for the last couple of months.
Well, I just have to ask Chris, does he have to kill us if he tells us what he's doing?
Why don't we let Chris go last, since his is probably...
It's pretty innocuous for me, so not a big deal.
Yeah, let's go reverse order of the intro. Steve, what you been up to lately?
You know what? The big deal right now I'm having a great time with is hyperconvergence, because it's picking up steam, and we're doing projects now, multiple projects, and customers are coming back and expanding it, and it's just the coolest thing. I don't know how much detail you want, but I'll just say hyperconverging, shrinking the data center, making storage, hypervisor, network, compute, all one, blob that you can install and manage easily is the big deal right now for me.
Very
Preach.
He's speaking Dwayne's language right there. Yeah, so I know Dwayne was on it because he presented. The Actual Tech Media guys, Scott Lowe and Dave Davis, did a megacast today, a hyperconverged infrastructure megacast, and I got a lot out of it. It was a lot of fun to listen in while I was multitasking and doing other things. So anything you want to add, Dwayne, from your perspective? I know you were on the webinar as well.
No, it was a good time. I think it was fairly. Everyone played nice and did their thing, and I think the community would have had a good look into to what's out there. There's definitely lots there now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting, everybody has their own spin on it, and everybody has their own, way of messaging and marketing. And it's interesting to see all the different topics that everybody focuses on. Some of them have overlap, but some of them are different. Like there were a couple companies there that I've not run into, but that's because I deal mostly in the traditional enterprise IT stuff, not in the OpenStack, KVM, Zen type of space. But there's definitely some interesting stuff going on, any way you look at it. So
I know on Twitter, Keith Townsend, I think his name's correctly, he's kind of I wouldn't say he's totally against hyperconvergence, but definitely a stalwart for like traditional storage and availability, and kind of, it hasn't changed in X amount of years, so it's a good thing. There's some proof points to that, but I think more people are coming around, and now that it's more of a mainstream delivery mechanism, I think more people are coming to it. At least I remember my first couple years at Nutanix, I'd be just saying hypervisor compute storage like a million times, but I think we've moved on from that now, so it's pretty awesome.
very cool. Thomas, any particular projects, or I know you've been busy having babies, so anything you can talk about work related?
Yeah, I've been really busy, also work related, because now you gotta take care of a kid, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so I work primarily with companies about the GPU. There's definitely a lot of interesting stuff happening. So I've been working a lot with Grid 1.0 and also 2.0. So I got actually my hands on the 2.0 technology. So that's something we can talk about later. And also I worked a lot with Moonset, with Intel, what they're doing. And hyperconverged is also something I have done a lot with. So definitely that's where I can see most of the customers, when everything comes down to it, it's about data and processing data fast, getting that app working fast. Many times, of course, you're working either in Citrix or Microsoft or VMware, but at the end of the day, it's about also getting the data processed. And I totally agree with Steve that is one of the most important things right now.
Hey, Thomas, do you combine your GPU work with hyperconverged yet? Is that something you've done?
Yes. Most of the time, if I can, I do that, and I do actually have quite a lot of success stories with that. Unfortunately, I haven't been making them into marketing material, but that's something I'm trying to do next year. So you probably will see me talking about it at GTC and Synergy, hopefully. So yes, I have actually where both putting in GPU and hyperconverged and also automating. So automating is something I'm trying to work a lot with, automating all kind of workflows, making more intelligent. That would be nice, of course, in the future if you can even automate it even more intelligent. And I'm more thinking about like putting in AI, but that's not something where we're not there yet. But I think automate is really important.
Are you talking there about the basics of like configuring GPUs per VM and user automating?
I'm thinking about automating everything from computers. So when you get a computer and when you connect even to the clouds, automating all the process from provisioning infrastructure and provisioning application and application settings and everything. Even also when you're onboarding and offboarding users and companies. So, and I think this is where actually a lot of companies they can learn a lot with is automating the process. When you're building, let's say, an app environment, you know, I definitely see a lot of companies where they're even doing it manually today, and I'm like, we are in 2015. Why do you have so many employees for the installing the apps manually? I don't understand.
Cool.
So that's
Yeah,
something I do talk a lot with.
seen a lot of that as well. It's just like, oh, the manual method is good enough, and we can't justify spend capex to buy a tool that can do it better, so we'll just continue to do things the old-fashioned way. And yeah, that's heartbreaking to me, because I think people's lives matter, and the way that they spend their time is kind of important. And I don't know, whether it's building servers or installing apps, there's a lot of room for efficiency.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, if we take all these kind of more GPU applications, right? If they're high-end GPU applications, a lot of times what I see is actually companies that they have an IT department, and then they have more these high-end users, and they have high-end admins. And when they provision their images, then they get the high-end admins in, and they install the applications manually, right? You know, just like, you know, I do understand that if you look at when the data is getting down and the profiles is incredible big, because that these applications are a bit more complicated, but you know, everything can be automated. That's and for a lot of people, they're like, you know, surprised it can. I would say that not everything can be, if you more look at app levels like AppV, and of course then there's all the other vendors from VMware, and also Citrix they're doing with the app disk, and yeah, FS Logic, and that's, you know, that's where I'm like, yeah, that's what a lot of people want to do, but again, okay, what can we put inside the app layering? What can't we do?
Right. Yep. So, DWAYNE, maybe you can share some of the things you've been working on. I know you have the Next Community podcast that you're actively involved in. What other kinds of things in the day job have you been up to?
So I've taken kind of a left turn with VDI and went into Hadoop of all things. So that's kind of been
Right.
Yeah, it's great. Kind of, you know, broadening the horizons. I don't know how to best describe it, but so that's been actually taking quite a bit of time running some RAs on our Acropolis hypervisor.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess the big news for EUC on our side is just the Acropolis and Citrix announcements.
Right.
Getting that, get that going. Interesting, you know, talking about GPUs, there isn't that support today for the Acropolis hypervisor, but just a ton of requests coming down that pipe. So.
Yep.
Yay!
Yay! Just like the hyperconverged megacast makes you super happy, you just made Thomas super happy.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable. Every application is getting more 3D. Like pretty soon, you won't even be able to use Office without a dedicated GPU.
Yeah.
Is kind of where it's all going.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the big things, and yeah, the life goes round and round.
And don't anyone forget that just because you added a GPU to hyperconverged infrastructure, all of a sudden it makes it ultra mega converged infrastructure.
Oh, it runs 5 times better when it's hyperconverged. But there are opportunities for vendors. That's why it was interesting listening to Thomas talk about what he wants to automate, because you can automate the install and get the driver set up, but how do you make sure the upgrade the next time you come and upgrade the box, that works out, and obviously all the work with the end users, which is super important.
Very cool. And Chris, anything you can share?
Lots of stuff I can share. You know, currently consulting for a federally subsidized mortgage corporation, which gives you one of 2 choices, and yes, it's as bad as you think it might be. But hey, that's why they pay me, to apply Clue where there is none, and I usually fail. But whatever. So we had actually been having an interesting conversation on our mailing list about their desired use of RDP proxy. and the wonderful security conversations we've been having around that. So it's always a good thing. But
I think the funny part of that was when you added the disclaimer that, by the way, it's RDP proxy, but they're accessing via XenApp session. I was like, what? Wait, what?
yeah. It's interesting, and I mean, some of the guys can, I'm sure, appreciate. I know Steve can appreciate this, and I'm pretty sure DWAYNE probably runs into this as well in their day to day. You have so many of these people that are stuck. They have a way that they're doing things. They have a known XenApp. I know XenApp. XenApp works. Okay, what can I build around XenApp? How can I do this in the way that I'm used to, in spite of whatever expert consultant vendor coming in saying, no, you did that way 5 years ago, 10 years ago in some cases, 15 years ago in some cases. And all of a sudden, here they come saying, okay, we want to do this and we want to do it this way, and they just will not listen when you say, no, there's a much better way of doing this now. And at the end of the day, that's their system, and you do it the way they want. So that's kind of the world we live in.
They're the customer, and they're the ones paying the bills. So
that's it.
Even if it's not optimal.
Yeah. Of course, the other cool stuff is in my spare time, and that is IoT. And so I have a session I'm doing at Summit that is basically, in a nutshell, I'm calling it IoT so simple a sales guy can do it. To be followed on, hopefully, not accepted yet, but we'll see if it gets accepted, by a GeekSpeak session Synergy. What's that?
Sales guy.
Sales guys, yeah. So simple a sales guy can do it. But to be followed on, hopefully, in May, if it gets accepted, I hope it does, by IoT so simple a 10-year-old can do it. And that'll tease that a little bit, because I'm working.
And this is why Chris is so popular among the sales guys and the 10-year-olds. Hey, Dane, I am chomping at the bit to respond. I'm hearing such amazing things. Let's hear what you've done, because I want to jump in. I've got questions from everyone.
Yeah. So yeah, mine's pretty simple. The conference season kind of cranked down a notch, and I've been on a fairly large design project for the last couple months, and then also was involved when Citrix did their Workspace Cloud launch event in Santa Clara. So that was kind of a highlight for the last quarter or so for me. But other than that, just really excited about stuff that I'm working on a day-to-day basis. The design project had me dabbling in all kinds of stuff in my free time, including all of the layering technologies that are out there, and trying to figure out what would be the best match for this environment. So lots of fun stuff going on. But yeah, I agree with Steve. Let's go ahead and dive into it. So maybe the first one, and this is just an open dialogue. What are all your thoughts about the Dell EMC acquisition? I think the word on the street is that it's the largest tech acquisition of all time. It's not the largest acquisition, but certainly the largest tech acquisition. And I think to be around and in the space when something like that happens, it's pretty impactful. So what do you guys think?
Talk about hyper-converged.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting timing-wise. I just came from lunch with a big customer, a major national retailer, who has been like a dyed and true EMC shop for a very, very long time. And now they're first saying the words, maybe we'll be on another platform, right? This is expensive, which everyone's thought for a long time. But when people of that size are questioning it, there's a big shift going on here. His feedback was he thought it was so much money for what they're buying. But what I was saying is EMC is definitely on the way down in terms of adoption and customers maintaining it, but it's still a huge market. And if Dell can twist it right and retool it, they have a tremendous opportunity. So it's like everything else. It's how well you execute. But I think it's a smart move. I think it's easy to write EMC off because they're the big, expensive three-letter name guy. But, Dell's good at commodity, and they could take a lot of those customers and products and make them, cheaper and better.
Yeah, and I think, Steve, you guys are HP partner as well, so you probably remember the internal rumor mill maybe a year and a half ago about HP potentially picking them up. And I just think it's interesting how the chips landed. I don't think there is another better company to have picked up EMC, and I think it's probably a good fit for Dell.
I also like this trend of going private. I think it's cool, so I'm optimistic.
Yep. Can't agree with you more on the notion of going private.
Yeah, it's, what are the downfalls if it fails? So I don't think it'll fail, but it's got a lot of moving parts. To me, what's interesting is that now you have a compute vendor owning a hypervisor essentially. It's one thing when EMC was just kind of controlled VMware to some degree. It's a lot different when you have a compute environment doing it. So, I thought when I heard that, my kind of gut feeling was, okay, well, it's 60 days until someone buys Red Hat, but that obviously hasn't happened. So, and that being said, all the analysts never saw this coming either. So we all just, it's just all talk at the moment. So.
Hey, but DWAYNE, that's why I was chomping at the bit to come back to you, because you were mentioning Acropolis and the hypervisor that Nutanix offers. And look at that contrast. Dell buys EMC on the one hand, and in contrast, you have Nutanix with their own essentially free hypervisor, right? What a contrast. What does that say about the market? That's just huge. And, what does that mean, right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I don't think there'll be some sales teams on our side trying to push, it's cheaper, but I think it's really just about controlling your own fate at this point. The next, IT's never boring, so it'll continue to intrigue.
It's one of the things I love about IT, right? It's definitely not a career you get into if you want to do the same thing 20 years from now.
But that's the funny thing. We just brought up on the podcast that meeting IT people that don't like to learn essentially is what it comes down to. Not that we all have the right way, but to be open and willingness to learn something is something different too.
But to be fair, it's ridiculously hard too. You have to make an effort and you have to progress, but all of us are very well established and experts at what we do, and every day is just a constant barrage of what I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree with you there, Steve. And that, when DWAYNE was talking about learning to do these RAs, I'm like, oh man, that sounds fun. Break into something that you don't normally do, whether it's a dupe or OpenStack or some of those other technologies that don't fall smack in the middle of the end user computing stuff, the stuff that pays most of our bills. That actually would be kind of cool to get an opportunity to go try something new for a little while. So I applaud you for that, DWAYNE.
So I have some input about the Dell EMC acquisition. I have actually been seeing different opinion, and also already some people who are taking some negative actions on it. Reason why I'm saying this, because some of the countries I've been in, I already now been seeing some of the people that work together with Dell now are actually, they're backing off. And I think it's because people are a bit afraid of what it means when Dell and VMware, now are they going massively attack against, let's say, Citrix customer base?
I think their attack vector is against almost everyone. I mean, you have storage and compute and hypervisor and applications and all of the kind of things. So again, hyper-converged. Here, have a Dell machine that has everything on it that you don't have to do a single thing with. And oh, by the way, I don't think they'll do this, but it's a possibility. VMware only runs on Dell. I don't think they'll do that, but it's in the back of my mind.
Yeah,
it's a great thing to spin.
Did you guys read the article of all the assets Dell's talking about selling off in order to afford the amount of funding that it's going to require to pick up EMC? Did you guys see that article?
No, but do tell.
Yeah, well, it's not just rumor. If it's in an article, I'm not just spreading FUD, but they're talking about selling off a couple of different business units, including our friends Quest Software, which make the Workspace and other products. Selling off Aperture, what is it, Sonic Wall, the firewall business, and then I'm trying to think. There's one more.
What about EqualLogic?
No, EqualLogic is going to stay in the same business unit that EMC would end up being dropped into. But those were some of the interest. Oh, that was the other one. You guys remember Perot Systems? Ever work with Perot Systems? It's that's another target for what Dell's looking to sell off. I guess they need to raise about $10 billion to help fund the 69 or whatever billion that the EMC acquisition is going to require, and this was one of their ways of getting that 10 billion is Quest, SonicWall, Aperture, and Perot. So should be quite interesting.
How would you feel if you were one of those companies? Good grief, or one of those products.
No kidding.
Feel sorry for the sales teams involved, and well, actually everybody.
But
Yeah.
Dane, just to add a big point there, while they're looking at divesting those groups, they're also stating clearly now that they will not break up EMC. So their goal is to keep EMC intact, which is interesting. So it tells you something about their strategy.
Yep.
I don't think they're going to be as disruptive as we might think. Like Chris was saying, they could sort of steer VMware and make it proprietary. But I don't think Michael Dell's really that much of an innovator. I see this as more like he's going to keep it the same and then make incremental changes.
I'm honestly on the fence about that because I could see it going one of two ways. I could see Dell, be it Michael Dell or whomever else, or the board, or saying, we have an opportunity that we now own the 800-pound gorilla in the virtualization market. We have an opportunity to flex that muscle and really make an impact in the market. Or we just let it go as it is and let it be a revenue stream like it is, and we're good. Knowing business like I know business, I'm erring on the side of flexing the muscle, because I think they're going to do it because they can. They think they can anyway.
All right. So what does that look like? They get their products to them and they go, oh, you only get the new version of VMware on Dell hardware, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
what you're saying?
I think that whatever new brand spanking hyper-converged thing that they have to compete with, name it, Nutanix, Moonshot, whatever, then that's the brand, that's the shiny new stuff that you only get in this way.
Well, I won't be that guy that puts DWAYNE in a tough spot with NDA content, but I have to imagine that this has some impact on the Dell Nutanix relationship as it relates to OEM. But I don't want to put you in a weird spot because I'm sure you have information.
I have my own weird mixed messaging with it, but you have to realize that deal won't come for another 6 months. The Dell sales teams, and they already have quota that they have to carry. Dell announced 2 new products on the Nutanix side, so there won't be any changing, but you can definitely see it coming. They did buy our largest competitor in a way, to some regards. So I don't know. It's interesting, but then on the HCI Megacast, you have another HCI vendor getting Dell hardware. So it wasn't an OEM, but it's still, Dell is becoming like a giant CDW in some weird way. Partner with everybody.
Yeah, I think you're right. They're like a meta supplier now, right? It goes beyond just providing computers. It's got different dimensions. But to Chris's conspiracy theory, the more subtle version would be they release a fully hyper-converged product that comes with VMware and storage and everything in one, and they essentially discount it out, right? Because they can.
Yep.
So
it's called Dell Evo Rail. Let's make it happen.
There you go. Yep.
Sorry, tongue in cheek on that one.
No, actually, that's exactly what I was thinking.
All right. So on the topic of divesting, let's change gears a little bit. Talk about our friends. I think near and dear to every single one of us on this call, Citrix. The one that is in the limelight with Elliott being involved and all of that is the GoTo business. I think it's been confirmed at this point, but I don't know for sure if it's 100% said and done. But what are your guys' thoughts on that? What are some products that you're vehemently opposed to them spinning off? What are some of your other ideas on our topic around Citrix.
Can I just add something? They just announced it right now on
Right
their
now?
yeah, on the Citrix, that they're spinning off the entire GoTo family.
Well, you're going to send me to the Googles, aren't you?
Google is your friend.
So,
Yeah,
that's-
it is. In the last hour.
EUC podcast announcing from the first time Citrix is
Breaking news.
GoTo family of products.
All right, so I'm going to throw this link into the tweet chat because I think I found the one you're talking about is the ZDNet, the ZDNet article.
There's a venture beat too. I'll throw it in there.
Yep. Well, this just in, folks. This just in.
There's the official one on Citrix.com.
Yep. And thank you for spotting that. Thanks, Anton, for dropping it in the chat. I guess it's no more FUD. It's a done deal. So let's
Dean, if I could say to your point, spinning off the GoTo brand, it makes sense. That was nailed and glued together kind of awkwardly from the beginning. So I can get behind that. The one that makes no sense and shows Elliot's total ignorance is spinning off NetScaler.
Yep.
That's just ridiculous. NetScaler is integral to both the ecosystem of the Citrix EUC products and to their networking cloud business. So splitting just makes no sense. It shows they don't understand the market.
Well, but again, is it a little bit of misdirection too? We want A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and oh, by the way, we don't really want G, but we'll just throw it out there just so you think you're getting something back when we don't actually get G.
So basically, if you say, I want a pony and a puppy and a kitty, you might get a pony.
Yeah, but you really wanted the pony.
it is Christmas time coming up, so maybe we could spring together and get all of the above.
And that's why you go private like Dell, so you don't have to deal with that stuff.
Exactly. And it all comes back around, and thank you for tying that together, DWAYNE. Very well said.
I think it's also quite sad because what does it mean as us as CTPs? Do we lose all the access to GoTo products?
Uh-oh.
That's something I use every day.
Uh-oh.
This is coming home for Thomas.
I'm sorry. I will pay for GoToMeeting as opposed to paying for WebEx because I like GoToMeeting.
Because GoToMeeting doesn't suck.
I'll pay for it.
Yeah,
So if that's the case, then that's the case.
Because it sucks less.
Going a little deeper, Dane, I don't think Elliot has this visibility. There are a lot of interesting products that Citrix scooped up over the years. I'm not just saying they should or being considered to be spinned off, but things like App DNA, Zen Server, and some others are probably underutilized, right? Because they kind of go to platinum to die, or they don't get fed. So that's an interesting thing too. Could Citrix spin off some of these great technologies into startup companies?
Well, Zen Server, I would argue, is already spun off. I mean, it's open source, it's doing its thing, and Citrix wants to keep going with it, then great. If it doesn't, you know what? I'll still use it. I'll still help develop with it. That's fine.
And Esther's jumping in on the chat saying spinning off the NetScaler is not part of the current strategy as far as the articles are saying.
There you go. Okay. So, yeah, I think anytime that there's outside influence, there's a lot of rumors that happen, and sifting through the rumors to find the real meat. It's unfortunate, but sometimes you just have to go by what's public. And articles when they say yes, it's official, we are doing X, Y, and Z. Because up until that point, there's just a lot of speculation. So it's good stuff. So along those lines, obviously some new products from Citrix. I mentioned one of the events that I was involved in about a month or so back, month and a half ago, was the Workspace Cloud launch event. What are you guys seeing in the market? What are you guys' thoughts? I'm obviously very, very passionate about it. Mostly due to the CTP program, have had really good access to the product managers and the folks that are making things happen for Workspace Cloud. What are you guys seeing in terms of the field and any interest from customers or any deployments potentially?
I can come with some. So I have actually customers that are looking at it who are already Citrix customers, and they look at it and then they look away again, which is a bit interesting. And the same thing is actually some of the clients I work with, they're also looking at Azure, and then they look at Azure and then they look away again because they think when when they do the calculation on the cost, for them it's too expensive. I would then say everything depends on what the requirement is.
Pricing and licensing.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can say firsthand that is a fluid discussion right now. Everybody is trying to get their arms wrapped around what is reasonable, what's the market willing to bear. Obviously, moving from a CapEx perpetual license model to even an annual, it fits for some customers, doesn't fit for others. But then when you add in the dynamic of a monthly subscription basis, it makes that discussion even that much more convoluted.
I think.
Go ahead.
Maybe a metric would be like they need to tie it back to savings of some kind. If it's going to save you a resource from managing, then you could justify the bill of it. So I don't know what work's been done in that department.
Yeah, I think it's still very early stage from my perspective. I mean, the definite key part that is a huge differentiator that's not there if you just buy the on-premises products, that I think it's still overlooked a little bit because there's not been enough work touting it, is the lifecycle management piece.
Yes.
When you talk about ROI, we started the discussion about automation and doing things more intelligently and all of that. Tools like Lifecycle Manager, what Citrix acquired, which was Scale Extreme, that is now the core of Lifecycle Manager, that's really where you build a compelling ROI, is showing cost savings justification for automation. But again, to your point, it's still fairly early in the market, and I don't think that level of effort has gone into it yet. But I do know that from the top level of the Workspace Cloud group, they're very interested to talk to customers and get feedback real time if the quote unquote list pricing or what they're seeing in the field for pricing doesn't quite line up with their business model. They've very much expressed interest in partnering together and working through this.
I would agree with that, Dane. I think it's clear that they're looking to find the market price. But I think it was DWAYNE mentioned, resources. So if you look at a basic Citrix EUC environment, it's 20-something VMs, right, to bring it up redundant, build up all the roles and so forth. It's just a general number, but it's a common one we see in our projects. You take an organization with a limited IT staff, someone who doesn't have the skill, kind of like Chris was commenting on in the past, you're going, hey, dude, manage 22 more VMs, right, to run these desktops. And Citrix Workspace steps in and goes, no, here's just this edge, workspace control server. It's going to be automatically updated. It's a pretty compelling idea. I tested it. I like it. But I was surprised when I presented it to a customer who's doing a refresh from an old Zen app to an FMA-based, 7.6 environment. They're going to expand. They're also going to move it to a colo. And they're pretty interested. Exactly for that reason. Do they want to build and maintain all this infrastructure? They just care about their physician desktop. They don't care about storefront and licensing and SQL and all this crap, right? They just want to give their users the tools they need. So I don't know if it's there today, but it's a very compelling story. And the most important thing for me is it's getting Citrix to think about consolidating and making things scalable and cloud-like. And I think one of the greatest benefits is going to be seeing some of that come back to the on-prem product. And then one last comment is there is also a discussion, I don't know how official it is yet, for another price for people that own the licenses and want to just add the management. And I think that's exciting. So it's like the customer case I brought up. They're going to refresh their environment. They already own all the licenses they need. They can pay a fee to potentially just use the control plane, not for the actual license. So we'll see if that pans out.
Very cool. Any other thoughts on those lines, either lifecycle management or Workspace Cloud?
I think some positive thing I've seen actually is with some U.S. customers is that Citrix actually they're really helping and trying to onboard the customers, also existing Citrix customers on the Workspace, but they just need a lot of help, and that's why the more information that's available, the easier it is, because the key to make it a success is simplify.
Well, it's their competitive edge, and it has to be their competitive edge, because all of a sudden you read some articles, you read some reviews and industry analysis, you hear, whether it's true or not, that Vue's catching up to Zen Desktop. Okay, Vue's catching up to Zen Desktop. Therefore, what does Citrix have to do to maintain or increase their competitive lead? Okay, cloud service, in my book, is a really good way of doing it.
Has anyone seen or been a part of the Enzo beta? I know it's at customer sites, but I haven't seen it from the vendor side.
Yeah, I think what happens is that it becomes a revenue generating opportunity, and those revenue generating opportunities are the ones that get early access. I've been signed up for the beta for some time now. I'm hoping to get access to it probably early 2016. But I get the impression that it's probably still another 6 to 9, maybe 12 months out before it's ready to GA and make put in the hands of real customers, not just integrators or partners.
It's also very ambitious, so it's probably going to, like anything else, going to have phases, right, of different feature sets. But it's a great concept. I mean, when it's real and tangible and solid, wow, it's good stuff.
Yeah, and I think ultimately that will keep Citrix on their toes as well, like anything. And frankly, just taking my CTP hat off for a second, I think it's great for the industry, and I think it's great for the world that we live in. I mean, we all entered IT for various reasons, but at the end of the day, I like seeing innovation, and I like seeing the ball move down the field, if you will. And I think having multiple solutions in the market makes everybody better. So I think it's great. One thing that I have really enjoyed seeing since Workspace Cloud launched is how Citrix has become very proactive about developing net new offerings and services. The browser app service was a good example of that. Being able to go up into Workspace Cloud, plug in a URL, and have it be hosted off of the XenApp published app browser, available from anywhere. I think that's awesome innovation. And if that was an on-prem product, it probably would have taken Citrix 6 to 12 months longer to get something that they were willing to put in the hands of customers in that type of capacity. And then they kind of followed that up with the AppDNA Express service. Throw an MSI up there and see if it spits back, hey, it's compatible, hey, it's not compatible with Windows 10. It's little teasers like that help encourage customers or not. Do I need the full paid for product like AppDNA Full Edition that's available in Platinum? Stuff like that is pretty cool to watch.
Well, Dane, I just have to second what you're saying. Citrix deserves major props for the development cycle of CWC and some of these other tools and Lifecycle, because we were in early, crashing alphas, and like before you could complain, it would be fixed, and your Ed server or your Workspace connector server would be updated, and you'd be like, wow, they fixed it. I mean, it was like right in front of your eyes, and that's amazing to see where that's going to go.
Absolutely. And I think that innovation will ultimately feed back into the on-prem products. So for the customers that are in Chris's space that will never touch a public cloud anything any day.
Oh, you have no idea.
They still get to benefit from those innovations. They just have a longer lead time that they have to wait. So, it's cool stuff. So speaking of new and innovating stuff, it's almost Christmas and New Year's time, so that means that 2016 is right around the corner, and Microsoft is at it as always, keeping new innovations coming. I want to talk about both Server 2016 and new things that you guys are seeing there, as well as Windows 10. So who wants to kick it off?
I'll take first stab at Windows 2016 for RDS.
Okay, cool.
I think I was just listening to a program manager or a product manager talk about some of the things or underpinning things for RDS. It was interesting because the conversation made it sound like they had to do a bunch of rewrite work to get it running for Azure, which seems kind of crazy because it's already pretty embedded into Windows 2012. So there's a personal session desktop, so they've kind of actually built in a new feature menu. I think it's has a more of a tie-in for remote FX. There are some things that I don't really see it'll make much difference, like pen remoting. Like I never use those things anyway. But I guess probably the big thing, and maybe Thomas can comment on it too, is remote FX getting some more added support for their GPU or what they do. OpenGL.
You're not asking me about that. So I just come from Microsoft MVP Summit, and everything is NVA. What I can say is that Microsoft is definitely changing, and the outcome. So for me, it was my first MVP summit, and also first being part of the program. And after listening, without breaking any legal things. It was the right moment, I was with a lot of people that have been there for years. Then Microsoft is innovating now and changing and really moving fast. And you can see that with Windows 10, with Azure, with Office 365, and next, when Windows Server 2016 coming, they have already announced that they are supporting GPUs in Azure. That's Hyper-V with pass-through, And they have also, what I know in public is that they are working on with the OpenGL support for remote FX, and that's a big thing. So it means that they are optimizing everything and they are embracing a lot of stuff.
The pass-through is huge because they don't have that today with Windows 2012. If you're going to run Hyper-V, there's no way to bypass through anything, so that would have required some work.
It does, and yeah. Well, you can even just look at the Xbox. If you have an Xbox One, how many of you guys have an Xbox One?
That was one of my wedding gifts. I got that. My wife got a camera, so I think
you made out better.
So there goes some rumors actually about that because they just roll out Windows 10 now on the Xbox One, and well, is the Xbox One running on Hyper-V? That's the question, and that would make sense if it is, and if they're using, let's say, Hyper-V. I don't know. It's just thought.
Interesting. Anyway, the only other thing I wanted to add about 2012, which they are releasing multi-point services. So basically,
2016, bro. Get with the times. Don't take us back in time, man.
I could do it. It's that easy. But multi-point services.
Great
so basically, engage the warp drive.
Brown.
88 miles an hour. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the multi-point. So basically, putting a VDI deployment, I guess it's more SMB based, but I just don't see why anyone would want to do this in this day and age. But they're creating the offering anyway.
Yeah, and it's not really creating. They've had it for a little while, but I think it's just fully integrating it into actually being a managed role on 2016. I started playing around with it just a little bit to see how was it different than RDS. And it actually reminded me, and this goes way back, well, maybe not way back, but did you guys ever work with In Computing when they first came onto the scene?
Definitely. Yep.
So I I got my first
Dane, just by the way, that's not way back, but okay.
I know. It's way back for me.
For us young whippersnippers.
Well, so in computing, some of my first experiences with centralized compute, well, one was running RDP and doing terminal services on Server 2000. But when I was working at a school district, we had these, I was actually the main advocate. I got the demo units and said, oh, this would be the coolest thing because we can run Reader Rabbit on one of these machines in the corner and then have 3 or 4, however many terminals that are connected off of them. They were the X300s. I know I'm probably way out to lunch, but it's basically the same thing as multi-point services. It's a dumb terminal that sits connected via an Ethernet jack to the main computer, and then the main computer is where all the apps run off of. And that's kind of, as I was researching on Channel 9 and whatnot for multi-point, that's basically what they've done, but they've folded it into a Windows Server role now.
It's an interesting point, Dane, because N Computing did actually do that model first. They weren't using a remote protocol in the early days. They had a multi-card that sent, I guess, like the frame buffer or the rendered video out to the units. It was kind of cool. It was kind of meant to be like in the same room.
It
or
was
a short
cool.
run.
We used them all the way up until Microsoft got really pissed off with them because they were basically using a 1-to-4 Windows XP or 2000 at the time license and not licensing all these different terminals. So, I mean, the fact that come full circle, Microsoft is putting out a solution that does this, that doesn't violate their own licensing, is kind of interesting from my perspective.
Totally agree. Hey, I also want to add from the chat room from Marius, storage spaces direct, and that brings up the implications of 2016 and Windows 10 are really deep. I mean, Microsoft's just doing so much development and innovation, and with storage spaces direct and some of their generally infrastructure pieces, they're basically deploying software-defined storage, and they're putting in replication across servers, which is kind of the missing piece that's always there. That's why you need shared storage and you want replication of data for redundancy. And that stuff's in 2016. Is it really good or is it Microsoft good? We got to see, as we start using it. But it's a game changer. I mean, they're giving you the platform, to basically build clouds with cheap storage.
Love it. Anyone else on the 2016? Nano. Who wants to bring up discussions around Nano?
So I think actually Nano server is going to be a huge thing, and so people who don't know what Nano server is, so it's this how can you say a tiny server with no GUI. And it's not like server core. They really stripped the OS down, so everything is running in command line interface, and you're configuring with PowerShell, and that's where Microsoft they want to take you is configure everything with PowerShell. They're trying to also minimize the footprint, and so you don't have to reboot a lot of times, and they're also enhancing the security. So I think this will be the future of servers in the data centers, because these are very small, efficient servers that exactly is doing one thing.
Well, Thomas, I think you're right, because the one thing that Microsoft hadn't really overcome yet is, the comparison to Linux. Like, hey, I can do this tiny little image and only compile in the kernel what I want there. They've got it. They've got this tiny little Nano server. It can run Hyper-V. It can run file server. It can do various roles. It's freaking tiny, and you control it from command line. It's really like they've filled a major gap, I think.
The beauty of IT, everything comes full circle. Throw everything in, take everything out. But I agree. I think it's going to be big. I think there's like a larger container story that around it too. It's probably driving some of it. As far as deploying desktops, like if you had server core or or Nano. I don't know if it's gonna. Maybe it'll gain you an extra desktop or maybe two. I don't know what it'll be, but
Right.
Interesting nonetheless.
Well, I'm getting my information from Google. I haven't tested it, but they're claiming significantly greater scalability, a lot less reboots, a lot less patches. So it seems like it's not a small gain. You know, it seems like a pretty big one.
And what I can add is, so I met one of it was actually a woman. She had developed a product so you can remote into PowerShell called PowerShell Direct. Have you guys ever heard about that?
I've heard of PowerShell remoting, but I haven't heard of PowerShell Direct.
So PowerShell Direct is actually, I think it's going to be one of the tools we will be using for the Nano server when we are configuring with PowerShell. So watch out for that one.
Not sure
Hello?
what that noise is. Did you guys hear that noise as well? Sorry about that.
But we got Marius and
Okay, so what I was saying is PowerShell Direct. You can actually remote Windows 10 or even the new technical previews, but maybe that would be one of the tools we'll be using for the Nano servers. That's not something that I think that we should look at if you're looking at PowerShell, but maybe
Got it.
lots of good feedback in the chat too, Dane.
Well, yeah. No, I'm trying to multitask. Make sure we're watching everything.
Both Rory and Marius are bringing up Nano and containers.
Yeah.
And Rory, of course, is throwing in Turbo.net versus Docker, Turbo.net versus Docker. And Aaron's giving a clarification that Storage Spaces Direct is targeting SMB rather than enterprise, which is cool, but I'm sure they're going to want to grow it. So again, it's that same thing Dwayne's talking about, circles and patterns. It'll start as a smaller solution and grow. But a lot of interesting stuff, a lot of interesting comments too. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, appreciate it. And I think, from my perspective, if Nano is anything like Server Core, which has been around for, I want to say 2 or 3 releases now. I think it first came out in 2008, I want to say, maybe 2008 R2. And it's interesting because where I would see Server Core being the most natural fit in the world, removing the GUI, removing the patch footprint, the attack vector, everything else, would actually be Hyper-V. And we've done quite a few Hyper-V deployments, and it's interesting to me how many of the customers insist on doing data center and then insist on leaving the GUI on there primarily for troubleshooting purposes, because the skill set just isn't there today to fully navigate through PowerShell to get to all of the troubleshooting skills or the troubleshooting tools that are needed. And I'm really curious how much that's going to change with Nano, even if it's just in a Hyper-V use case, which would kind of be the most obvious fit for me. Any thoughts on that? Any of you guys seen anything different?
Windows admins are not Unix admins.
Well said, Chris. I think you summed it up beautifully.
So that's actually where I think Microsoft is actually telling people now to make a decision and make them, you know, you want to be like a programmer, developer, and, you know, because that's, you got to choose where you're going to work with.
Yep. Anyone else that's been doing Hyper-V deployments? How many of those deployments did they leave the GUI on? Or you come back 6 months from the time that it is deployed and the GUI's back on there? Viewer?
Oh, we have it turned off by default, but I know you can come back and someone's tried installing it on our side. But I think it's interesting. Like the other problem on the Hyper-V side is SCVMM and the actual Hyper-V manager. There's some nuances between them which would drive you to do that. So,
yeah, I wasn't going to throw SCVMM under the bus again.
I like doing that in printers every show if possible.
If I can, yeah, licensing next. Coming up next, licensing. Dane, I have to say that was the reason for my comment, is it good or Microsoft good? Because we've done a lot of Hyper-V deployments, and now that they're baked in, it's not really that good. It's Microsoft good,
Right.
if you know what I'm saying, just as an overall comparison to other hypervisors and unified storage solutions. Just a comment.
Yep, makes sense. Let's see. Any other topics on 16 before we move over to talk about Windows 10? Obviously, a lot of stuff moving and shaking in Windows 10.
So, you know, I'm to be honest, I'm super excited for Windows for Server 2016. I cannot wait to get my hands on when they release it. Well, even the next build.
Okay. What is there anything specific that you're planning on testing out?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. You can't talk about it. That's fine.
So let's wait and see soon. You will see some stuff. Okay.
Sounds good.
Hey, Dane, I'll give you a different point of view. I really just haven't had time to mess with Windows 10 and even absorb it, but in meetings with customers, I've been really surprised by everyone's plans are to go to it soon. Like, you know how that whole thing about Microsoft has like a good OS and then a bad one, and this is kind of like the good one where people who made it to 7 are like, yeah, we're going to go to the 10 like soon, like Q1, Q2 next year. So there's something about the timing, the feature set, the not suckingness of it that a lot of people are ready to move to it. That's my main observation.
There's already an initiative where I am. They just got off of Windows XP just this last year, and it was painful. There's still XenApp 4. There's still a presentation server 4.5 farm out there. There's still 2003 servers out there with legacy apps on them that I don't know if we'll ever get rid of. But now all of a sudden here, which is in the past couple of weeks, they're like, Windows 10 now. Like, you're kidding. We just got done with Windows 8. No, Windows 10 now. So at least where I am, the sentiment is we got behind the 8 ball once. Let's not get behind the 8 ball again.
So that's the same I'm seeing, unfortunately. If we take Citrix, they haven't been fully supporting Windows 10. I don't know, Dane, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, I do. The first little bit of testing that I did with Windows 10, I found out all kinds of things break when you use the optimized VDA feature within Zen Desktop, which I think just about every admin has it checked by default when they're doing installs, unless they're knowledgeable that they don't necessarily need to optimize. And just things like the database for the start menu completely breaks when you go optimize the VDA. It has something to do with search or indexing or something along those lines. So that was one thing. I also think right now Windows 10 for non-persistent is completely not prime time ready. There are just way too many issues as it relates to profiles and folder redirection, and good discussions happening online. And he's written a couple blog posts. Absence Bigot has written a couple blog posts on why Windows 10 non-persistent doesn't make sense right now. But I think just the ecosystem in general is still getting there, and Microsoft didn't make it easy for them this time around, because a lot of the ways that profiles are being handled in Windows 10 break a lot of the profile management solutions like Citrix Profile Management or Absent or Res or any of those guys.
Exactly, Res. Res is also definitely not my favorite. That's something I can add in. So I have some customers where they're waiting because they're also pushing hard, like you, Chris. They're saying Windows 10, Windows 10, Windows 10, and they they want to implement it. But they're a Res customer, and then Res is not even fully supporting with their suite. Not yet. Soon will.
Yep. Now, I do think, this is just my personal opinion. I don't know if I'd go into a large enterprise and say, yeah, it's ready for production, go do it. But just my general experience so far running Windows 10 in a persistent VDI, it's actually been pretty solid, particularly around Zen Desktop. I haven't done much testing with Horizon 6. with Win 10 VDI, but Zen Desktop in Windows 10 is pretty solid. Windows 10 in a remote FX Microsoft EDI type of context is pretty solid. Even things like remote FX vGPU with NVIDIA Grid, that works pretty much right out of the box. So I think, you know, persistent is not nearly the challenge. I think non-persistent and probably safe to say 2016 is going to be a real pain when it first comes out. So any other thoughts on Windows 10? I know there's some GPU stuff that needs to happen to get that to where Thomas wants it to be. It's
Yes.
publicly documented. It's not supported today.
I'm a bit disappointed in it because, you know, not because of Microsoft, but because of the ecosystem. So Microsoft actually, you know, they made a lot of good stuff. If you look at the engine inside the Windows 10, where it's DX12, and they have optimized it like really a lot with the code, which means standard applications are using the GPU much better. And also you have multiple GPUs, it does it more intelligent. And a good example I can tell you is, if you look at the new, let's say the Microsoft Surface Book, right? They have two GPUs in the machine, and that's where, you know, even Windows 10 is fully capable of using the resource much more efficient. And that's something where it becomes quite interesting. Is, you know, the Windows is using it much better, but then how can we get these systems out in the enterprises?
Well, Windows might be able to use dual GPUs, but not all programs can. In fact, a lot don't.
Well, it depends on how they are programmed. So yes, I would say so. Okay, so some applications, yes, that's not the big change in how they consume the GPU, but others there is. So if you look at AMD, what AMD is doing, and NVIDIA, they're doing a lot of benchmarking of the drivers, how the drivers are working on Windows 10. And you can see actually that AMD, they've improved big time now, coming back with better compatible drivers for applications and even games, where it's working much more efficient. And that's even with not latest and greatest, but actually old GPUs.
Well,
so have done a lot of good stuff.
I'll put my disclaimer in there that I'm a gamer and I'm a proud member of the PC Master Race, and, you know, any of you console peasants can just, you know, not say anything. But on my PC builds, you know, I have been NVIDIA SLI forever and a day, and I have been varying levels of happy with it. And for the build that I'm planning to upgrade next year, I gotta say I am really on the fence as to whether or not I want to do SLI, because it is so poorly supported in so many games and so many heavy graphics programs.
Yeah, so we just need to get you one of those Titans, and you'll be good to go. If you need more than a single
I'm
Titan,
going there. I think I'm going there.
If you need more than a single Titan, I would bow at your throne, because that's a pretty badass setup. Even just a single Titan.
Yeah, exactly. So if you look at, you know, what's happening next year, that's VR is going to be huge, and even HoloLens coming out in the first stage. But that's going to use a lot of compute, and so I've been trying the Oculus, both the DK2 and the DK1, and also the next one, and they're using incredible amount of GPUs. So one of my friends, we actually been testing he's running games with a car simulator, right? And it's using free GPUs in a slide configuration, just good running smooth.
Nice.
Ouch.
That just tells something about how much capacity you need compute, which is insane.
I don't even want to know what his heating and electric bill is. So that probably puts off quite a bit of heat.
Yeah. Well, that leads up to after we talk about the Windows 10. So what about HoloLens? What do you guys? I'd like to hear what your views is on it.
Not had any personal experience with it, but definitely like to hear about it, see it. One of our customers went down for a Microsoft Executive Briefing Center day, EBC day, and they had it there, and so they came back with some feedback on it. and they're already thinking about applications a year to 3 years down the road of how HoloLens can be used in their environment. But I'm a spectator at this point. Haven't made any firm mind up on what I think about it in the enterprise specifically.
What about you, Chris?
I have to admit, I did not understand the question fully.
So
What do you
Microsoft
think about
HoloLens, that's augmented reality.
HoloLens. Okay, yeah. Sorry. And, insert snide comment about accents here. HoloLens. Some of the stuff I've seen with it is with the augmented reality and things like that, about taking a Windows desktop and quote unquote projecting it on a wall and interacting with it in that whole Minority Report way. I have to say, that's some cool stuff right there.
It is.
Did you guys see the demo? I don't remember if it was at Build or which one it was at, but they had this demo of Minecraft on a tabletop with HoloLens. Did you guys see that one? I'll find a link to it and I'll paste the link into the crowd chat. It was absolutely unbelievable.
I can imagine.
All these things are fun, but the one that I thought was really the most practical were things like they were showing the demo of going into anatomy, learning the human body by walking through it, that kind of thing. That's where I think the real value is. Obviously, it's going to be fun, but you can teach and learn whole new ways with this.
Well, you could use it for anything. So I give you an example, because I remember the first time I saw the commercials, what they were doing with it. It was even where you say, okay, now you go out to the kitchen and you need to fix something with the sink. And now, you can just spin up a Skype call, and then you got a professional guy looking at what you're doing, and then he's pointing to the thing real time with the data. And I'm like, that is so far out future, but now it's coming.
I'm sorry.
I've simply just been using Snapchat, so I don't.
Oh, okay. So I don't feel so bad going where I'm going. Just because I'm that guy. Rule 34.
Sorry?
Rule 34.
Okay. So okay.
You don't know what Internet Rule 34 is? No. Sigh.
He's not been browsing on the dark webs like you are.
So the reason why I talk about it is because so it's one of the wheels why Microsoft where they're going now, right? And it's making why the other wheels are spinning. So a lot of the technologies what we work with also in end user computing is Windows 10, soon Server 2016, and a lot of stuff in Azure. And I think HoloLens is one of the things that we it's very innovative, but we also got to look at it and say, how does it fix into the stuff we work with? Is it ready also for remoting and a lot of stuff?
Very cool. Hey, Chris, I did just Google Rule 34. Just admit it, I don't know what it was. And I have to say, it gives me the thought this might be the first internet technology that was not driven by porn, as far as I know.
I won't admit to the fact that I can already think of a couple of applications, but there's money to be made in such things.
My God.
Oh. Well, on that note, why don't we cover one last topic, and then we will go ahead and wrap up. So, Thomas, I'll toss the puck over to you, just because you're our resident all things GPU god. We all bow at your throne. Talk to us about Grid 2.0 and what you're seeing, any testing that you've done, any conversations with customers. I think that's going to be the last of the big updates for the last couple months. So what are your thoughts on Grid 2.0?
Yeah, so NVIDIA, they have released the Grid 2.0, which is the next generation of Grid. So they have two new physical GPUs, which one is an M60, which is twice the performance as a K2, which is the Grid 1.0. And then they also released an M6 card, which is for blade servers, and that's well, it's about half the size with the frame buffer, so it has 8 GB frame buffer. The M60 has 16, The compute is 1500 on MX6, and then on the M60 it's 4096. So a lot of GPU goodness. So it means we can have higher density, and so that's great, right? So you can actually put it on Zen server, or you can put it on vSphere and install Grid 2.0. You do need to get some special servers that are supporting this because it needs more power. That makes sense, the more you're doing these high-end GPUs, it will also need special servers producing more power. But the thing what NVIDIA have done now is they have now gone into becoming a software vendor.
Yep.
And they now licensing the Grid 2.0. So they're coming with 3 license model, which is the first model is what they call virtual PC, and then they have a virtual workstation and a virtual workstation extended. And these are functionality depending on what you need to do. And then you paid for that tier. You even paid for vGPU and GPU pass-through. Yes, you pay for vGPU and GPU pass-through. And I will repeat the last one again. You pay for GPU pass-through.
I think you need to say it one more time. Can you say that one more time, Thomas?
GPU pass-through.
So wait, Thomas, I get the feeling you don't like this whole licensing thing. Just guessing.
I really like NVIDIA. What they're doing, and I do understand where they're going with this model. They should have just done it with Grid 1.0 instead of introducing a license model where they changed the entire industry, all the markets out there, vendors, software vendors, hardware vendors, everything, embracing GPUs for virtualization. And it's been hard work even in convincing people to adapt this GPU. And by putting in a license model, I do understand why they're doing it. I just missed they did it before. What is a bit, there's a lot of confusion there right now because the prices has not been, what are the prices for the software? So that's some of the things I can see my client they're struggling with, because when they talk with Dell, they talk with another, Cisco, Fujitsu, whatever, and they ask for the prices. They get the prices for the chips, and then they also got to get the prices for the vGPU or the pass-through, and that's where where they're struggling a bit. And some have seen the prices. Some got let's just say the big eyes pop up in the head, and some run away. And others say we need it, right? Yeah. What I'm a bit afraid of is it become a niche. If the price comes so high that it goes one step back and it becomes a niche.
Well, Thomas, do you have a public price, or is it not announced? I mean, do we have a ballpark of what we're talking about?
There is no prices. There's on Twitter there was a guy that threw out the prices from some he saw in the channel, but I'm also hearing, different thing that's not the price. So I would not put my word on what the price is.
Okay. Yeah, just to say we record on this podcast what the price is, NVIDIA could change it. So right now it's very fluid, and they're telling customers reach out to your channel partner for price.
So it's basically how much money do you have?
I didn't say that, Steve. I didn't say that.
Well, but the point that I wanted to make is that EUC is layers of many technologies and products, and exactly. If it's a modest cost, it's fine because they're writing software and they're maintaining it. But if it's too high, as Thomas says, it makes it a niche, and I think that'll be a future determination we'll make. Not today.
Yeah,
I can say so. Let's see. So there's some huge things right now, happening. So AMD, they announced multi-user GPU, which is a competitive product to Grid. You can have multiple people running on one physical card with AMD. It's not GA yet, but they announced that at VMworld, and that's one thing they're working on. Intel is also working on virtualizing the GPU. And the big question comes down to, will Intel take money for the virtualization of the GPU? Will AMD do that, or will they make it free? The things I saw in public was that AMD announced it will be free, the virtualization of it.
Yeah, and I think you know, the industry needs to evolve just like anything, and time will tell on the whole licensing structure. Just what price is reasonable. To Steve's point, I think there was initial for the customers that I worked with that have had discussions that are already using Grid 1.0, that need to buy new cards, that wanted to have a discussion about 2.0. There was an initial sticker shock factor, but outside of that, I think that now's the opportunity for NVIDIA to figure out what will the market bear and what is a reasonable price, because Steve's point, it is absolutely logical that they have costs associated with developing this, and at the end of the day, NVIDIA is a hardware and software company, and a lot of their IP is in the software. So it makes sense. Large OEMs like Dell and HP and EMC and others, they pay for updates to their firmware and drivers as part of support and maintenance. So it makes sense. It's just a question of what is the market willing to bear.
Well, that's true, but if you look at also Quattro, which is professional, right? And if you put in a Quattro in a server and you're using pass-through, you're not paying for it yet.
Correct.
You still got to put that in mind. And I do like what NVIDIA are doing with the vGPU, but you can also look, Microsoft, that vGPU, which is totally different, right? Because that's API, but I'm also like, will Microsoft compete against the model, or that's something where I'm a bit. Let's see what will be happening. What I do like, so let me give some good feedback, right? So the stuff looks really good, okay? And I just yesterday I talked with a client where they use a lot of Linux, and they have just embraced Grid for the last 6 months, and super happy. Now they want to put out Grid for all the Linux, and the Grid 1.0 is actually limiting the Linux, because you can only use pass-through, and the Grid 2.0 platform actually enables vGPU for Linux. So that's quite interesting that you have high density Linux workload working with the platform, and that's something where I think we will be seeing a lot of interest in the platform also.
I think it's great stuff. I'd definitely love to see how the market evolves in that way. I mean, to go back to our friends Citrix, their first release of the Linux VDA didn't have any graphics acceleration, and the market is starting to come around to the fact that we need Linux in the data center, hosted for our applications and desktops, and GPU is always going to be a component of that. Horizon 6, of course, has GPU or 3D support for their Linux agents, and I know there's other products out there like Thomas, you've worked with NICE and others that maybe, I don't know if Virtual Bridges does 3D, but there's definitely other players on the market that do Linux VDI, and they're not all limited to two-dimensional or non-GPU accelerated. So
exactly.
It's going to be interesting to see how the market evolves.
Definitely will. So the last thing I just want to add is, so the Grid 2.0 is also, it's built on the Tesla platform, so it means it's high-performance computing. And when you get the card, actually it comes with high-performance computing enabled. You need to change it from HPC to visualization. This is really cool that you can actually use it for HPC. So, imagine people are working in the daytime with visualization, shut down the host, and then you switch it over to HPC mode, and then you crunch numbers. That's something you can do with the Grid 2.0 platform.
Can we mine for bitcoins while the users go home?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm way ahead of you on that one.
Well, listen, guys, I think this has been a really great discussion. There's definitely been a ton of interaction on Twitter. I love seeing everybody jumping in and speaking their mind and bringing up different topics that either we forgot to bring up or just adding to the discussion. So thank you guys for jumping on the podcast with me today. For any first-time listeners out there, you can find all the information about this podcast at www.eucpodcast.com. We also have a Twitter account set up at EUC Podcast, as well as the hashtag EUC Podcast. So thank you guys for helping me record our fifth episode of the EUC podcast. Look forward to talking to you soon, and have a great week. Thank you. EUC podcast.